You've been conditioned to dread it. The vacant apartment when everybody's gone home. The Saturday evening with nothing and nobody. The weekend looming ahead with nothing but emptiness and your own silence. Society has conditioned you to regard this as failure. Loneliness is a disease to be cured. Solitude is something to be solved. Being alone is proof that something is deeply, desperately wrong with you. But what if they lied to you? What if the one thing they instilled within you to fear is the source of your greatest strength? What if the empty room is not a jail but a refuge? What if the silence is not a form of punishment but freedom? You sense it sometimes, don't you? In those fleeting moments when the world ceases to demand your attention, when the phone falls silent and the responsibilities stop, a strange commotion, something that almost seems threatening. That commotion frightens the system that requires you sidetracked, reliant, desperately seeking contact elsewhere. The system that gains from your failure to sit alone with yourself. Tonight we venture into the forbidden land, the location they don't want you to find, the hidden room of your own independent mind. Friedrich Nietzsche knew something that centuries of society has been struggling to keep from you. Isolation is not the lack of relationship, it's the presence of self. While the masses clump together in herd morality, feverishly begging for approval and definition from the group, Nietzsche stood alone to walk into the mountains of thought. He found that the greatest intellects, the most imaginative minds, the most harmful men in history, had one thing in common. They understood how to be alone. The more virtuous men are differentiated from the less virtuous by their boldness toward themselves, he wrote. But today's world has turned this on its head. Today, boldness is being able to scroll endlessly through other people's lives. Courage is having weekend plans. Strength is never having to sit alone with your own thoughts. This is not an accident. Enze realized that real power originates in what he termed as self-overcoming. You cannot overcome what you will not confront, though. You cannot change what you will not analyze. You cannot become what you will not envision. And all of that takes something the system cannot offer, cannot create, cannot replicate. Time alone with yourself. While alone, Nietzsche gave birth to the Übermensch, the one who has transcended the desire for validation from others, beyond groupthink, beyond the security of someone else's rule. But what they don't want you to know. The Übermensch is not some philosophical myth out of textbooks. It's what you become when you're no longer afraid of your own presence. They assassinated solitude with 1,000 small killings. They first made you believe that boredom is the enemy. Every vacant second has to be occupied. Every pause needs to be productive. Every silence must be destroyed. Your phone was a tool of self-defense against your own mind. Social media was a tranquilizer against introspection. Continuous connection was a suit of armor against the sinister landscape of your own mind. They established what Nietzsche would have termed a slave morality for solitude. To be alone was selfish. To like being by yourself was antisocial. Solitude chose to signify dysfunction. One needs to have chaos inside oneself in order to bear a dancing star, nature penned. However, chaos needs room. Stars require darkness to burn. Creation needs emptiness in order to fill. The system won't permit this. All meditation apps provide you with guided thoughts, because they're afraid of what you'll think unguided. All social media sites vow connectivity, because they fear what you'll discover in disconnection. All entertainment devices provide distraction, because they're aware of what occurs in stillness. You start to recall who you are. You begin to question what you've been instructed. You realize the disparity between your real wishes and the engineered desires they've sold you on. You sense the disparity between your genuine voice and the ensemble they've taught you to sing along with. And that's when you get dangerous. Not dangerous to others, hazardous to the whole system that relies on your contribution to mass unconsciousness, hazardous to the attention economy that needs your perpetual attention, harmful to the politics of fear that requires your dependence. But this is what happens when you reclaim solitude as sacred practice, not shameful condition. Your thoughts cease to be ambient noise and turn into foreground music. The din of other people's opinions grows quiet until you can finally hear your own voice at last. In solitude, you find out what Nietzsche termed as your will to power. Not control over others, but control over yourself. The power to select your thoughts, guide your energy, design your reality from the inside out. You start to differentiate between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the painful knowledge of separation from others. Solitude is the empowering feeling of connection with yourself. Loneliness leaves you grasping for any presence. Solitude leads you to be discerning about whose presence you welcome into your space. The alchemical process starts. All the things the world taught you were weakness are now strength. Your sensitivity is now discernment. Your introversion is now depth. Your need for space is now sovereignty. You no longer apologize for saying no to invitations. You no longer feel guilty for liking yourself. You no longer view solitude as a consolation prize, but instead see it as the main event. In the quiet, something occurs that cannot be done in the din. New ideas burst forth out of the darkness like stars as the sun sets. Problem solutions arise without coercing. The next iteration of you starts forming in the expansiveness of unbroken being. You know why Nosy spent all that time alone in the Swiss Alps? Why every visionary ever needed time of solitude? Why every advancement needs a breaking away? Now you begin to see why they're so afraid of your solitude. A person who can be alone doesn't need constant entertainment. A person who enjoys their own company doesn't require endless shopping to feel fulfilled. A person who finds meaning in silence doesn't need to consume information constantly. You become economically dangerous. Your attention is no longer for sale. Your time is no longer available for exploitation. Your power is no longer invested in upholding systems that never benefited you. It's more than economics, though. A human being who has made friends with their isolation cannot be coerced by the threat of abandonment, cannot be manipulated by the offer of belonging, cannot be governed by the threat of exclusion. You become a political threat. The politics of fear require your fear of isolation, being unique outside the tribe. But if loneliness becomes sanctuary and not penalty, if being different is freedom and living and not exile, then their most effective weapons become blunted. Nez realized that the person who has conquered loneliness is what he referred to as a free spirit, a person capable of independent thinking because they're at peace with being alone, a person capable of standing alone because they've come to know that standing alone has often meant standing for truth, and truth, as you are learning, is the most dangerous thing of all. Because once you've tasted the freedom of having your own thoughts, your own beliefs, your own path, you can never again go back to the easy prison of group consciousness. So how do you make empty time into potent space? How do you move from suffering aloneness to empowering solitude? First, you have to eliminate the addiction to continuous stimulation. Spend some time each day on what NZ could term productive emptiness. No phone, no music, no podcasts, no books, just you and whatever happens in the emptiness. It will be uncomfortable at first. Your brain will be racing. Your body will be restless. This is withdrawal from the distraction drug. Allow it to occur without attempting to repair it or fill it. Second, rehearse what he termed eternal recurrence in your loneliness. Ask yourself, if I were to live this same life forever, what would I change? What would I retain? What feels like my authentic self versus what feels like an acting job? Loneliness affords you the solitude to be able to answer these questions truthfully. Third, practice what Nietzsche called philosophical experimentation. During your time alone, challenge everything you've been taught to believe, not cynically, but curiously. What if it's the opposite? What if there is a third way? What if the experts are mistaken? Your isolation becomes a laboratory for thought experiments that can never occur in the face of others' opinions and judgments. Fourth, cultivate what he referred to as amor fati, loving your fate. Alone you can learn to accept your life the way it is, and at the same time strive to change it. The only place this contradiction makes sense is in the inner chamber, where contradictions can exist without reconciliation. And last, develop what Nuzzi recognized as the culmination of all philosophical endeavor, becoming who you are, not who you were raised to be, not who the world wants you to be, not who your history has talked you into believing that you are, but who you are really underneath all the conditioning, performance, and adaptation. This is the gem buried in isolation, the pearl that developed in the annoyance of being alone with yourself, long enough to find yourself. And then something changes. Solitude ceases to be something you suffer and becomes something you guard. The bare apartment is no longer prison but palace. The silent night is no longer punishment but privilege. You understand, you're not antisocial, you're selectively social. You're not missing out, you're choosing out. You're not lonely, you're whole. This wholeness frightens those who remain dependent on others for a sense of self. Your happiness in aloneness becomes a mirror of their neediness for company. Your tranquility in solitude reveals their fear of connection. You've become what Nietzsche dreamed, A dangerous person. Not dangerous in that you hurt others, but dangerous in that you no longer hurt yourself. Not dangerous in that you eschew all connection, but dangerous because you prefer connection out of wholeness instead of need. The establishment that benefits from your insecurity now finds you to be unprofitable. The society that thrives on your desperation realizes you're no longer starving for what they offer. You move in the world differently now. Social engagements become options instead of imperatives. Relationships become mindful choices instead of clinging. Solitude becomes a haven you go back to instead of a penalty you flee from. Others notice. They can't exactly define what's different, but they feel something different. Some will be motivated by your self-assurance. Others will feel threatened by your independence. Both are evidence that you discovered something true. This is what Nozan understood, that the world has forgotten. The greatest rebellion is not rebelling against the system. It's becoming so inwardly whole that the system ceases to matter. When you can truly be happy by yourself, you're no longer dictated to by the fear of abandonment. When you can discover meaning in aloneness, you're no longer tricked by the thrill of belonging. When you can generate your own purpose, you're no longer living by others' validation. This is the birth of the higher human. Not higher in that you're superior to others, but higher in that you've transcended the need for others to fill you up. Not superior in that you judge those who have not yet achieved this liberation, but free in that you've released yourself from judgment for needing it. Your aloneness becomes a revolution, not a raging revolution of protest and contention, but a quiet revolution of personal sovereignty. Not the violent overthrow of outside structures, but the tender taking back of your own interior authority. And this revolution is contagious. Others start to see that aloneness doesn't kill you. They notice that solitude can be an option instead of a requirement. They see that a human being can be whole without being attached to another human being at all times. Your own example is permission to others to experiment with their own relationship with aloneness. Your own peace in solitude emboldens others to confront their own companionship. This is the way the world does change, not through mass movements or social action, but through individuals who have done the inner work of wholeness, through people who have mastered the art of loving themselves enough to delight in their own company, through risky people who have learned the alchemical strength of solitude. You arrived here being ashamed of your aloneness. You're departing understanding the strength of your solitude. You came here convinced that there was something wrong with you because you didn't need constant companionship. You're leaving now knowing that your strength at being alone is one of your finest qualities. The world will keep on trying to persuade you that you're not complete without what it's offering, that happiness is outside of you, that purpose has to be shared in order to exist, that aloneness is something to be transcended, not celebrated. But you know better now. You've experienced the freedom of being friends with your own mind. You've seen the power that comes from owning yourself. You've received the unusual blessing of being truly satisfied with your own presence. This makes you a threat to every system that depends on your engagement in collective unconsciousness. This makes you dangerous to every structure that benefits from your insecurity. And that's what you are supposed to be. The question is not whether the world can handle you being alone. The question is whether the world can handle you being whole. Now go and find out. Take back your solitude. Reclaim your sovereignty. Become the dangerous person that Nietzsche knew was always within you. The one who doesn't require the world's approval to exist. The one who has discovered the greatest treasure themselves. In the following comments write this: I prefer the strength of isolation. Let's find out how many are willing to take back what was always theirs. Your aloneness is not a glitch in your code. It's a feature, and it's time to stop apologizing for.